Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Equestrian Adventuresses podcast. We are your passport for the European show jumping world, and I am your host, Coach Crystal Kelly. And for those of you who are joining me in the YouTube channel, you can actually see the horsies are coming in for a drink and saying hello. So you can see the national park, the mountains in the background, and that is Mrs. Lily saying hello to everyone. So, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm super excited about today's episode because when I was growing up in California, this was something that I was always really curious about, and no one had the answers for me, right? My dad had traveled a lot to Europe, with the military, but to be honest, I didn't know anyone growing up that had actually competed abroad, had, been internationally and did some show jumping on horses. So, I had this dream since I was young of competing internationally, and I would watch them every day on TV at the time. Man, can you imagine in the 90s we actually had show jumping on cable TV, and I would watch that all the time, and I would wonder, like, how is it that you can compete and travel and compete in show jumping abroad with horses? And I've always been fascinated by this topic. And so that is why I wanted to really deep dive for you guys today. So today is going to be the American's Guide to Competing Abroad. Now, of course, if you're in the UK or South Africa or Australia, this also applies to you. But obviously, I grew up in America, and when I was in the US, as I said, I had no answers. How do you go to Europe? How do you compete internationally? And that is really what I wanted to dive into for you guys today. So, I have quite a few notes that I'm going to go through. I would love it if you guys are joining me live in the YouTube or in our Facebook group. If you could go ahead and comment where in the world you are joining me from. This is a very international tribe. I am, of course, here in Spain. So, as I said, I grew up in America, but I actually left the USA at 21 years old. It was actually my 21st birthday. I got on a plane to go and work my first international job. This was at a five-time Olympic stables, and I didn't look back, right? I've stayed mostly in Europe, but also I've worked in Africa and Asia, even the Middle East. So I've been to a lot of countries working with show jumping horses. And so the knowledge that I bring you guys today, this is really from my personal experience traveling and working with horses in over 20 countries. I've traveled over, 65 plus countries. And so that's really what I wanted to share with you guys today. So the first thing that I want to mention is you do have to plan in advance. Okay. And I know that sounds kind of obvious, but here's the thing, especially if you're going to go and compete in, FEI competitions or CSI competitions, you have to get those entry submissions early, but there's a whole lot of organization that happens way before you even get to the show. Okay, way before show day, there's a lot of stuff involved, not just with your horse. Your horse has to have its FEI passport. The horse has to have all of its correct vaccinations. The horse has to be competition ready, obviously, competition trained for the height and level that you want. But also, you have to prep if you're going internationally with that horse. Let's say, for example, your horse is stabled, here at my stable in Spain, for example. If you want to go to France on a competition, or if you want to go to Belgium or wherever, although it's an easy thing to do, you still have to have the vet check the passports. You have to line up a whole lot of things involved with, transporting the horses internationally. Even though it's a 3-hour drive to France for us in Spain, there is a lot of things that go into bringing a horse from one country to another. It's not necessarily as easy as just loading them up and driving them there. Okay. It's not quite the same like in the USA. There is no hard borders. There is no, let's say, customs that's going to stop you, but you have to have the passport and the paperwork in order. Definitely vaccines, all this good stuff. And there is, as I said, a whole lot of behind the scenes which is happening. So you do want to make sure you're planning in advance. Give the person enough time, okay? Because I'm going to assume you're not riding your own horse, okay? Because let's face it, to get a horse from the USA to Europe for, a week of competitions or a month of competitions, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, one-way trip, it's $15,000 to transport a horse via plane from the USA to Europe, for example. So, $30,000 round trip just to bring your horse for a week of competitions, for most people doesn't make very much sense. Unless you're at that Grand Prix level and you're planning on winning a six-figure purse, then let's just say you're not bringing your own horse. Okay, so whoever it is that you are working with when you are looking to hire somebody's horse, like for example me, I have my mare as a Zafira, so somebody can actually kind of hire her. We can go to the competitions together, and I actually do all of that organizational stuff behind the scenes without you, so you can just show up, have a good time, ride a FEI horse in a competition, and look at the Mediterranean. But as I said, plan in advance. Start planning your European competition journey well ahead of time. There might be visa requirements for you. Okay, there might be transport or logistic related things, not even necessarily for the horse. If you are hiring somebody's horses, if you have a kind of team and support network behind you who is based here in Europe, obviously that streamlines things a lot. But you yourself, depending on where it is you want to go, you might need to organize some visas, things with your passport, hotels, where you're going to eat, where you're going to stay. All of this is definitely things that you want to consider and factor in. If you're going to be competing and riding a lot, you don't want to stay in a hotel, which is a hour-long drive. Okay, in the US, it might be very normal to drive an hour on the motorway to your destination. But here in Europe, an hour drive, it's a lot. Okay. The roads are smaller. You might not be on the motorway. You might be in a lot of twisty, windy roads, driving in little villages and things. It takes a lot out of you, especially because they're, manual cars, not necessarily automatic cars. You can rent, I think, automatics, but the common thing here is manual cars. So you wanna make sure that you have a hotel which is very close to the competition or to the stables, to the facilities. You wanna make sure that you have your, car rental organized. You wanna make sure that you have everything pre-planned. When it comes to planning out your competitions, okay, it's again very important that you align yourself with somebody who's based here in Europe, okay, like myself. Because if you don't, it can be really difficult to get to know which competitions to go to, but not just that, on Google, everything looks manageable. Right? Everything looks easy. In America, Google actually, if you type in Google an address, it will actually take you to that address. But here in Spain, for example, Google doesn't really work. Okay, Google doesn't really work. It might kind of get you in the rough area of the stables, but it's not going to get you to the doorstep like 9 times out of 10. So you want a local or somebody who's familiar with Europe who can tell you, like, hey, this competition, this stables is worth going to. It has, easy access for the horse truck to arrive. It's got good facilities. The facilities are really amazing. The arena is really good. The jumps are well taken care of. There's a big difference between that and then showing up to something that's a little bit, let's say, off the beaten path, and maybe you weren't expecting that, or maybe it's not as to the caliber that you were thinking it was going to be. So having somebody kind of on the ground here in Europe, it does make a big difference. Just so you have that in. Okay, the inside and out of which competitions are worth going to, which ones are worth skipping, which ones are worth maybe that extra detour drive. Okay, so yeah, competition planning and scheduling is also part of that a thing that you should kind of decide with your coach or with your European based trainer like myself before you even arrive in Europe. I would say, yes, you can kind of pull up, for example, on the FEI website, hey, here's all of the different competitions in Europe for the month of, October. So you can kind of go onto the FEI website, say, oh, wow, there's a competition in Spain, and there's one in France, and there's one in here, and there's one there. You can find all of that information on the internet. But again, do you know which ones accept international riders? Because not every competition does. Do you know how to get the permissions in order to be invited through your federation in order to compete at that particular competition? Are they maxed out? Right? Maybe they already have enough international riders and they don't need any more. So research and choose those competitions wisely. You don't want to be wasting time signing up or planning to go to one venue or one competition or one event, and then it turns out you're not actually able to go there, okay, for whatever the reason is. And it does happen. Okay, it does happen that sometimes you try and submit your, let's say, invitation and it doesn't get accepted, right? It doesn't get accepted. So make sure that you have a plan B. And again, having somebody on the ground in Europe who knows, like, hey, if plan A doesn't work out, there's a different competition that's not that far that I think you would enjoy, that has really nice courses, really good course designers. Let's do that as our plan B in case plan A doesn't work out. Okay, so having that kind of plan A, but also plan B. All right, plan B is also very important. And I want, if you're taking notes, like, write that down. Okay, have a plan B. Some of you guys are perfectionists and you're going to want to obsess over plan A. This is the competition that I want to go to on this exact day because that's the day that I have off from my work. Life with horses, it doesn't always turn out that way, right? Doesn't always turn out that way. So have that plan A and that plan B. The next thing is understand the rules and regulations for the competition that you're going to. So, for example, in the US, and this is a minor one. For example, in the US, it's common knowledge. It doesn't matter if you're riding in California, New York, Oklahoma. Okay. It is common knowledge in the warm up arena, for example, that you pass left shoulder to left shoulder. Right? And then you come all the way over to Europe, and yes, it's true. In most of the countries, it's also left shoulder to left shoulder. And then you might head over to France and realize very quickly that they're passing right shoulder to right shoulder. Okay, for whatever reason. All right. I'm sure Napoleon Bonaparte has something to do with it. But these little tiny cultural nuances and things you might not be aware of when you get on the plane and then you go into the warm up arena and then you have some French person shouting at you because you didn't pass right shoulder to right shoulder. Okay, so you want to make sure, and these are some of the small quirky things that you don't necessarily have to 100% understand everything going into it, but do your best to understand the rules and the regulations for the competitions that you are planning on attending. Okay, and again, I have to stress this like so many times, but having that person, okay, aligning yourself with your mentor, someone like me I'm from America. I've lived in Europe most of my adult life. Actually, my entire adult life. I legally couldn't drink when I left the USA. So my entire adult life has been here, mostly in Europe. Align yourself with that person, okay? Because they can really help share what the differences are between the USA and here. So that way you're kind of prepared and familiarized right off the get go, and you're not taken by surprise or having a bad experience because you just didn't know that, that was the customs or the way that you should do things. Okay. So that's another thing. Understand those rules and regulations. Again, if you're competing in an FEI competition, you can very easily pull up the FEI website, double check the rules and regulations, or again, just have that conversation with your coach, okay, with me before you actually, book that ticket and find out like, this is the gear I need to bring, this is what I need to be doing, this is the expectations, and, kind of go from there. The next thing is make sure you have all of the necessary documents and paperwork. Okay. Yes, of course, your passport. Passport for the horse that you're hiring. Make sure that they are registered with FEI, that they have their passport. Again, vaccines, everything up to date. Double check all of that stuff. Make sure that you have the health certificates. As I said, if the horse is traveling internationally in Europe, they do need to have a health certificate from a vet. That's not something that, as an American, you should necessarily worry about, but just double check and make sure that whoever is hiring you your horse, that they have all of that documents and paperwork, happening. So that way you don't have to kind of stress and worry about things that you don't know how to deal with. The other thing is, make sure when you're traveling overseas, I do like to say, make sure you have printed somewhere or easily accessible your medical information. Okay. Emergency contact numbers, medical information. If there's, some old injuries that you have, if there's some other concerns or things, make sure that you let your coach and trainer know in advance. So that way they can help you and make sure that, if if something happens, you are covered and you are prepared. The other thing is insurance, of course. Everyone always wants to know about the insurance. What do I do as far as insurance? You can definitely find a travel insurance company which will insure you. There is something that I want to share with you though, because I was recently speaking to a travel agency who actually specializes in people traveling from the USA to Europe, for example. Um, and what they were informing me was you have to be very careful if you are an amateur rider. The second you win money, okay, prize money, you suddenly count from the insurance company's perspective as a professional. Okay. And the reason that that is an important thing to take into consideration is because not all insurance companies will pay for professional sports. Okay. So if you're traveling to Europe, even though in your brain you're an amateur rider, you're just going for a holiday, it's a vacation, it's fun, just double check with your insurance company or make sure you clarify with one if you are trying to get an insurance. Double check that what happens if you win prize money. because I've definitely had conversations with various travel insurance companies where they would not cover you had you won prize money anytime throughout that week. So not even on that day. But if at any point in your stay in Europe you won prize money, heaven forbid you win €5, right? €5 or €25, heaven forbid, because now all of a sudden, if you were to have an accident or need to go to the hospital, they will not cover you. Okay, so that is a key thing that you need to look into and double check, is that your travel insurance will cover you even if you win prize money, and therefore in the insurance company's eyes, not in the FEI's eyes, not in, normal equestrian eyes, purely speaking about the insurance company, making sure that you are not considered professional because you won €5 prize money. Okay. So that is another thing that you want to gather as far as necessary documents, your insurance company information. As I said, any medical information, anything like that that might be important for your coach to know and have copies of. Send them those documents in advance, and just double check, like, cross your t's and dot your i's to make sure that your insurance company will actually do their job if, heaven forbid, something happened. Okay. The other thing that I want to mention, and I've been mentioning this a couple of times, but hire yourself a European based trainer and coach. Okay. Hire me, for example. I'm here, like, I live here. I'm not that far from the competitions here in Spain. Like, you can hire my mare, you can come here for training, even if you're not interested in competing necessarily, but you just want to come here to have fun in Europe and, jump big jumps on fabulous horses and get some training and coaching. Like, find that European-based trainer and coach that you align with, so that way, I've had this happen to me personally. I've had this happen to me personally where I flew thousands and thousands of miles, I paid thousands of dollars for a flight, and then I get there, and guess what? My, let's say, riding style does not mesh with that person's riding style or coaching style. And I've had that happen where, I flew all that way, and then it was like, I don't really wanna ride with this person. Um, I don't want you guys to end up in a situation like that, okay? Make sure that you are on the same page, the same wavelength. That's the cool thing about, what we do at the International Equestrian. Like, you can do my audio lessons, you can read my book, like, you already know my coaching methods before you come to me because you have, all of your coaching programs and training plans and homework done virtually. So you already know that you like what I do. But yeah, make sure you find that European based trainer and coach that you're on the same page with. Okay. Don't just sign up for a random lesson with somebody because they're famous or because, it sounds really cool to say, I took a lesson from so and so. That is actually one of the worst things you could do. And I do want to stress, just because somebody's an amazing rider does not mean that they're an amazing coach. Okay? Doesn't mean they're an amazing coach. So just because somebody's been to the Olympics does not mean that they can actually coach you to be in the Olympics. Okay? The coaches of the Olympians are usually the ones that you want to take lessons with. When I was first working in Europe, when I was 21 years old and I was working at this 5-time Olympic stables, yes, I was fortunate. I got quite a few lessons from the woman who was owning the stables. She was the 5-time Olympian. She's the champion. She's the one that everyone wants to, get lessons from. I did get quite a few lessons from her, and she was amazing for sure. But to be honest, her lessons were not that good. Like, I wouldn't pay money for them. Okay? That was me, personally. She was okay. She gave me a few valuable tips. 10 years later, 13 years later, I can't tell you or remember what she taught me. However, her coach her coach was regularly training me, regularly giving me lessons, and his lessons were so powerful, so impactful that I still to this day remember a lot of the things that he taught me, and it actually, changed the dynamic of my riding, basically. I basically changed the way I rode in 1 month training it basically intensively with her coach. And it just kind of put me on a totally different trajectory that I wouldn't have gotten had I not trained with him. And he was not an Olympian himself. He was not an Olympian. I don't even, you can't even Google this guy. Like, he doesn't have a website. Okay. As far as most people are concerned, he's a nobody, right? He's not Googleable. He's not on Instagram. He's not famous, but he was good. He was good. That's who I trained with. That's who taught me, and that's who I learned the most from. So don't just try and sign up for a lesson because it sounds cool with some Olympian or some famous person. Like, actually do your research. As I said, take my audio lessons in my app, right? Sign up for the horse riding lessons app, take my riding lessons, and you'll know very quickly that you like my style and you're super excited to come here and work with me. Um, okay, let's see, moving along. The other thing that you want to do, and make sure that you have the ability to adapt to the different writing styles. Okay, I do want to say, and I know this because I am American. I am American. I grew up in California. The hunter jumper thing, the community in the US, it's pretty big, right? It's pretty big. I think you can't really escape it. It has influenced the way that equestrians in the US ride. Even if they're jumpers, even if they're show jumpers, the hunter jumper has a big influence on the riding style of the American jumpers. And in Europe, there is no hunter jumper, right? Doesn't exist here. It's not a thing. Okay. So if you are American and you've only been riding in this hunter jumper bubble, even if you're a show jumper, right? But you've been learning this hunter jumper style, this hunter jumper way of jumping, then you come over here. It might be a little bit of a culture shock to find out that the way that you've been taught since you were a baby how to ride that way is actually not the way that the rest of the world rides. Okay. Here in Europe, it's much more classical. We have a completely different riding style. And there's a lot of biomechanics behind, the European way that we're doing. There's a whole lot of reasons why we're doing what we're doing, what we do here. And of course, we are in Europe collectively playing with bigger jumps for the most part than the majority of the people in the US. In the US, they have crossroad classes, 2-foot classes, 2'6" classes. That doesn't exist here. Okay, that doesn't exist here. It starts at 1 meter and it goes up from there. I'm training my young, baby horse. She's 5 years old. I'm training her for the FEI competitions here in Spain. The season just started this month, and it starts at 115. Okay, it starts at 1.15 meters, which is, I think, just under 4 foot. Okay, it's like what, 3 foot, uh, 6? No, it's bigger than that. I think it's 3'9", right? Is the 115. So that's where it starts. Okay, that's where it starts here. We don't have the smaller classes. We jump bigger here. We have the horses that can jump bigger here. Okay, you don't really see people signing up, on quarter horses or whatnot. Like, everyone has a warm blood here, almost. Like, almost everyone's jumping a warm blood unless you're a cross country event or something like that, where thoroughbreds are obviously the dominating horse. But yeah, everyone here has a warm blood. They have access to horses that can jump big jumps. And for these horses to jump 115, 110 when they're young babies, I mean, it's nothing. It's nothing for them. So I really just wanted to mention, like, you are probably going to have a bit of a cultural shock here. You're going to have a bit of a culture shock if you're not used to it. And again, if that's you, I would highly recommend what you do is you actually submit an application for me. Submit an application. You're going to find a link in the show notes. Okay. I want you to find the link, click on it, submit your application to me. There's going to be a section there for you to send me your writing video. Okay, when you send me your application, your writing video, you're going to tell me what your goals are. I'm going to get to see actually what you are doing in the saddle. I'm going to get to see your horse, see exactly what level you are. And then from there, you're going to schedule a one-on-one strategy call with me. If you're a good fit for what I do, then I would highly recommend you do one of my virtual coaching programs. We have 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. And that way I can actually get you on a training plan and a path. So that way, before you come to Europe, you're already at the level you need to be. Okay, you're already jumping at the level you need to be. You're already riding at the level you need to be. You're already beyond, let's say, the basics. Okay, I can't tell you how many people they send me applications and they need help with the basics. Okay, they need help with the basics, not the jumping. The jumping is the easy part. We have to get the basics solid before we can start doing the jumping. And so that's why we have training plan and system to get that part solid. So that way we can then move on and progress to the jumping training plans that we have fully built out for you. So that is something that I would recommend is if you are actually serious about training and coming to Europe, do your training before you even leave, before you get to Europe. Because coming to Europe, for a week or for 2 weeks or maybe even a month, it's great. It's dandy. But wouldn't it be awesome if you didn't just learn while you were here, but you actually learned before you came here? And then that way, when you're here, you're not worrying about the basics, right? I want that when you're here riding in my beautiful arena in Spain. I mean, look how gorgeous it is. I don't want to have conversations about the basics with you, right? I don't want to talk about your position in your seat and blah, and you need to not arch your back and you need to have your legs wrapped around the horse's belly. Like, I don't want to have those conversations. Okay. I want you to be a solid rider. So that way you can ride my horse and I can say, jump this, this, that, and the other thing. Okay. Like, that's what I want to work on is you jumping, having fun, having a good time, and not worrying about like beginner stuff. Okay, so start your training and preparation before you even leave the US or whichever country you are, and really like focus on it. Okay, get on a training plan, work with a coach like me, submit your application, as I said, find that link in the show notes, and submit your writing video, jump on a call with me, and we can chat more. Okay, so um, hopefully I will hear from some of you guys. I do see that there is a question from somebody in the group who's asking about work visas. That's a totally different topic. Okay, getting a work visa in the USA and Europe, working visas, especially if you're American. This is a whole conversation on its own. This is not something I can solve in 1 minute. I will say very just briefly, if you're an American and you're interested in working in Europe, you're not going to get a visa very easily. Most horse stables, unless you're like a super professional rider, there is absolutely no reason to hire an American because there's plenty of Europeans to hire. Okay, so why would they go through the trouble of trying to get a visa for you, a working visa, let alone that, to hire somebody that, no offense, in the US, you guys are jumping, as I said, smaller jumps than we're jumping here. So why would they hire somebody unless they're like really, really amazing and there's a reason to hire somebody in the US? But you'd have to really stand out. You'd have to really stand out. When I got the job in Belgium, I got that job because I really stood out. I was certified in a number of things. I was a very good rider. I had a super solid foundation. I was not a, Olympian, but I had a very solid foundation. And actually, my Olympic coach, she did actually compliment me. She gave me some really good horses to ride, and she did compliment my riding and said to me, like, you're doing really good, and I can work with you, right? So unless you're at that level, you're not really going to get work here, at least not paid work. Maybe you could do an internship or get a working student thing, but paid work, that's going to be very difficult. Okay, so yes, that was a question from our group. Thank you, Ashwara. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong for submitting that question. Those of you who are also listening to the podcast, submit your questions to us. Yeah, join our Facebook group, reach out to us, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you guys. So don't get scared or stuck and feel like you're alone in this. Like, we are a tribe, we're a community. We are here to help you and support you in your dreams. And I want to see you guys here in Europe. I want to see you guys competing in Europe. I'm super excited. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, make sure you leave a review and you share it with your friends. Okay, share it with your friends. And don't forget to submit me that application and writing video. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And I will see you guys very soon in our next podcast episode. Bye, everyone. Bye.